What's up, guys? Thanks as always for supporting the show. It would mean a lot to me if you would take a second to scroll down and hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any more of our videos. Also, make sure you follow us all over social media so you don't miss any of our content or show announcements. Kind of a wild game. Memphis completely dominated most of the second half. Ja Morant was like annihilating them. He was just getting to wherever he wanted on the floor. He had 26 points just in the second half. And Dallas kind of felt like they were on their heels most of the game. And by the way, Memphis has been a top 5 offense this year, and it starts with Ja. No one can really guard this guy. He's playmaking at an extremely high level. He's just slicing and dicing teams in the middle of the lane. He hasn't been shooting very well this year, but he's got such a repertoire of counter moves and over-the-top shots that he can hit in the short to mid-range. Like he's over 52% on floaters and hooks this year. So even though he's shooting like a super low 29% on off-the-dribble jump shots, he's still getting enough over-the-top shot creation as an option for him in the short to mid-range, and his playmaking has been so good there. It's just been a problem for a lot of teams in this league as Memphis has been a really good offense. But Dallas walked him down in that fourth quarter. PJ Washington, I thought, was the star of that run. He had a couple of huge threes. He beat Jay Huff on a driving a closeout out of the right corner where he made a really athletic move towards the rim. He also got the key stop on Ja Morant, a possession where, again, like with Ja, you give him space because the pull-up jumper's not there, but even if you beat him to the first spot, it's his counter moves that he has in that mid-range, Euro step spins. He hit Klay Thompson with a disgusting spin move in that fourth quarter that just left him like glued to the floor. And like he just has all these counter moves in that range. So you have to like absorb contact by beating him to the spot. Then you have to recover to that secondary move. And he got a great contest on a Ja Morant little mid-range shot where he forced him to really fade and have to shoot it higher than he typically does and forced a miss. It was a huge stop in that game. Luka Doncic hit a huge three after Ja Morant hit a three that put him up 8. He had a huge three, a step back over Marcus Smart that pulled them back within 5 and kept the game close. Derek Lively had 2 huge offensive rebounds. And then Spencer Dinwiddie hit the biggest shots of the game. A running transition 3 on the right wing that kind of was a little bit of an iffy shot, but like he got his legs into it and he shot it up in the air and he knocked it down. And then a couple possession, I think it was the very next possession, actually. He ends up hitting the dagger on the right wing that puts the Mavericks up 5 and they get out of there for the game. Now, before we move on to some of the big picture stuff, a lot of talk for coming out of that game about free throw differential and like, oh my God, the refs just gave Dallas so many free throws in that fourth quarter and blah, 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 blah. And like, you guys know how I feel about this sort of thing. Like, I am consistent across the board, regardless of team, regardless of who it is. I think complaining about free throw differential is the lamest shit in the world. It's a loser mentality. Even when I see pros and pro coaches do it, I'm like, ugh, like that's just such a bad look. Because like, once again, when you go on the road, you expect that you're going to probably be on the wrong end of a couple of calls. It's part of your mental toughness going into that situation. You have to be ready for it, prepared for it, and be willing to play through it, right? And then 9 times out of 10, when I go back and watch these games and I see a free throw differential, the team that's getting more free throws is almost always the team that is playing a style that is conducive to it. They're usually playing with more force. They tend to have like a play style that is maybe more grifty and just better at getting to the line. They usually are bigger and more athletic, and smaller players are trying to compensate for it by hacking and doing that sort of thing. And like I watched that game and like, yeah, there were a couple of calls I didn't like. The offensive rebound with the one that got reviewed where they ended up reversing it and giving Derek Lively 2 free throws. Like, yeah, I disagree with that. I think it should have just been Dallas side out of bounds or baseline out of bounds. Like if you're, it just is ridiculous to just reward somebody with free throws for contact that happens all the time in the end of these games when guys are fighting for rebounds. So like, yeah, I thought that was a bad call. There was also a Jaren Jackson baseline drive where I thought he got Derek Lively was out of position and I thought he kind of came down on his shoulder. I thought it should have been a foul, right? But the rest of them, like Marcus Smart trying to fight over the top of a screen against Luka Doncic, like 45 feet from the basket and tripping him, like that's a stupid foul. And it's a foul every single time. You tripped him so he fell. The ref's not going to just let it go. And you're in the penalty. And again, that's a pick 45 feet from the basket. Luka's not going to pull up that shot. Just go under. By physically fighting over the top of that screen, you put the ref in a position where he could make a call, and he did. There was another play. It was a three-point game, like with like 2 minutes left. And Luka gets a defensive rebound, and Marcus Smart just runs in and hacks him on both arms, like right in front of the ref. If you watch the replay of that, you can see the ref like blow the whistle and kind of shake his head a little bit as if like, dude, you're making me make the call. Like, what the hell are you doing? And so like more often than not, when I see games like that and I go back and look, the team that ends up in the free throw disparity is just doing stupid shit. And that's what Memphis was doing. Yeah, there were a couple of bad calls. You're right. It's part of the game. If you go on the road, you expect to get a couple of bad calls. I'll be rooting for the Lakers tonight in Miami. I expect them to get a couple of bad calls down the stretch of that game. That's just how it goes when you play basketball, especially when you go on the road. It's always a part of the game. It can happen to you at home too. It's a variable. You go into games knowing the refs are going to make mistakes just like we are going to make mistakes. That is part of basketball. And again, like I'm not trying to harp on Memphis fans here because I've seen Dallas fans do it. Hell, Lakers fans, the Lakers have the best free throw differential in the league over the last couple of years. And I've seen Laker fans say LeBron gets the worst whistle and AD got hacked on that one. Like everyone does it. I personally think it's lame. I think it's I think it's a huge waste of time to even focus on. I have big picture concerns about officiating in the NBA, but I think talking about it within within the scope of competition is a big waste of time, and I think it's a loser mentality. And again, like this has been a consistent theme for Memphis. They have struggled with execution and decision making at the end of games. They're 2-6 in clutch situations this year. They had a negative clutch net rating a couple years ago when Ja was healthy most of the season. Again, like this is one of those things where it's like a lot of times at the end of these games, it'll swing on a couple of decisions. I thought Marcus Smart rushed a three above the break on a ghost screen. I thought it was a bad shot. Him committing those two bad fouls. Those three mistakes get wiped out. That could be a very different game, right? Like it's just more often than not, it just comes down to your decision making and execution in those situations, not something out of your control like the refs or something along those lines. And bottom line is Ja Morant, after slicing and dicing them all night, really couldn't get anything for himself except for that 3-point shot that he hit from above the break there in crunch time. So like that was the issue. At the end of that game, Luka was able to consistently generate some pretty high quality shots and Memphis wasn't. They ended up getting the win. And key offensive rebounds for Dallas, things along those lines. I was thinking about this while I was watching the game last night. I think Dallas is the third best team in the entire NBA. I landed here in a different way than I did last year. Like last year, I had Dallas as third as well going into the playoffs. I had Boston and Denver, and then an end of a tier, and then I had Dallas as the top of the second tier of championship teams. This year, I came in with Dallas at number 5. I had Denver and New York above them, but from what I've seen from all three of those teams this year, I think that Dallas is better than both of them. They just have so many good players. And some of last year's guys have gotten better. Luka and Kyrie, I'm not going to get too far into them. Like Luka's numbers are down this year and everyone's freaking out. I couldn't care less. I expect Luka to be a better player than he was last year by the time he gets to the postseason, as long as he stays healthy. So I'm just not worried about Luka. And by the way, in his last 2 games, he's averaging 37 points, 10 rebounds, and 9 assists on 57% from the field and 47% from 3. With 7 steals, by the way, as he continues to play passing lanes really well. Like Lucas seems to be getting back to form. I'm not worried about him. PJ Washington is shooting the ball much better than he did last year. You remember last year after the finals when I talked about how much PJ Washington would probably be repping above the break threes all summer in the gym? Well, he's shooting 49% on above the break threes this year. He has good form. I think he's capable of being a reliable shooter there. And that could be key for the Boston matchup. As we know, in the Boston matchup, with Derek Jones out of the equation, that's likely going to be a center on PJ Washington and him needing to hit pick and pop jump shots if they were to get back into that matchup. Those above the break threes are vitally important for them in that specific matchup. He's also just a really good functional athlete. Like he got that key stop against Ja. He gets contested defensive rebounds. He brings real downhill force driving closeouts. He can beat mismatches in the post. He's just a really, really good player. Derek Lively is just awesome. He had 6 offensive rebounds last night. Last year, Derek Lively was basically a 1-to-1 assist-to-turnover guy. This year, he's a 2-to-1 assist-to-turnover guy. Like I talked about guys getting better. Derek Lively and PJ Washington are just better basketball players now than they were last year. That's an add of talent to this team. By the way, Derek Lively is over 50% on hooks when he needs to finish over the top of a switch or a quick offensive rebound putback, something along those lines. He's generated 13 points on 10 post-ups this year. That's low volume, but that's 1.3 points per possession when you dump the ball to the block to Derek Lively. Him and PJ Washington just make for a very athletically imposing front line. They defensive rebound really well when the two of them are on the floor together. Dallas has not been a good defensive rebounding team this year, but they get 75% of their defensive rebounds that are available when PJ and Derek Lively are on the floor together. They both can switch in ball screens and guard perimeter players. They run the floor super well. Dallas has a 96th percentile transition defense when those two are on the floor together, and they provide spacing in their own ways, with PJ Washington knocking down shots and driving closeouts, and with Derek Lively as a vertical spacer and a guy who can make plays in the 4-on-3 when he gets ignored in blitzes and stuff like that. So like PJ Washington and Derek Lively have both gotten better. Daniel Gafford gives them depth to have a good center on the floor for 48 minutes. Spencer Dinwiddie has become like their de facto third option and is closing games for them at the 3. In the last 5 games, Spencer Dinwiddie's averaging 17 points and 6 assists on 52% from the field and 52% from 3. Not to mention he gives them a good perimeter defense option in that lineup. And, I actually find this really fascinating because I wanted the Lakers to bring Spencer Dinwiddie back. I thought he was a good player, but he did not have a good offensive season the brief time that he was in LA. And a big part of that was where he was in the pecking order. Like, Austin was getting more touches than Spencer. D'Lo was getting more touches than Spencer. LeBron's getting more touches than Spencer. Hell, Rui's getting more touches than Spencer. Anthony Davis is getting more touches than Spencer. Spencer was like the 6th option on that team as he'd come in as a backup guard. Right? So like, as I look at Dallas's situation and the recent success that Spencer's had, Spencer's a rhythm player. He needs to have the ball in his hands, and he needs to feel like he can take a shot without getting in trouble. He's the kind of guy, he's got a little bit of that audaciousness in him where he's like, he will take that movement transition 3 in a clutch situation, but he's also got the confidence and the skill to knock it down too. He just has to be in rhythm. And again, he'll have stretches when he goes cold and he has his issues, but I like him as an option there. He gives them an option, and that's really the key. It's about versatility. We haven't even talked about the depth of the roster. Guys like Najee Marshall, Jaden Hardy, Klay Thompson. Klay Thompson hasn't even played really well this year, right? But like, they have versatility. When you take a look at their core 4, so Kyrie, Luka, Derek Lively, and PJ Washington, we can assume that those 5 are more or less, or those 4 are more or less going to be the closing 4 for any matchup. Right? But because of certain players are playing better, they have a lot of different options they can go. Like, oh, you're playing a big team like the Denver Nuggets and you need more size. Well, bring in Maxi Kleba. Just go Luka, Kyrie, and then go PJ, Maxi, Derek Lively. Now, all of a sudden, you've got a lot of size. You can put a big on Jokic while having a big in help on the back line, right? You can put Kleba on Jokic and put Lively in help, right? You can bring in extra size for that matchup. Oh, we're guarding Boston, and we just need another guy who can guard on the perimeter really well. Well, you can go with Najee Marshall at the 3 or Spencer Dinwiddie with as well as he's playing. Spencer's a good defender. He's not a great defender, but he's a good defender, and he can really do the job. He's got long arms, good size, good strength. He can move pretty well, right? Let's say you're playing like a team like an Orlando or another team that has a lot of size that likes to match upon. A team like the Lakers, for instance. Like, Klay Thompson is one of the best options in the league for like defending players in the post and shooting the 3. And so you could put Klay at the 3 for matchups like that. They have a lot of versatility for different types of matchups in the conference. And it didn't feel like that last year because they didn't have, guys like Spencer Dinwiddie and Najee Marshall. They didn't have guys like Klay Thompson to have for those types of looks, right? They're deep enough to stay high in the standings all season. We just saw them weather the loss of Luka for a little while. And I think they match up better than with Boston than they did last year. Do I think they'd beat Boston? I wouldn't pick them, but it's an easier path to see. Like, PJ Washington making above the break 3s would really help in that matchup. I think Luka will be in better shape and defend better in that series after he got embarrassed last year. Spencer at the 3 gives them another mobile perimeter player to have as an option in those situations. Kyrie was really cold in that series last year. It's easy to see a pathway where he would be better this year, right? So like, they're a long shot still because it feels like there's a gap between them and Boston, but I feel like they've closed that gap some amount. And so all it takes is certain variables to go their way for them to be able to potentially get it done in like a puncher's chance type of sense. And if you believe in that, again, all odds provided by DraftKings here, the Dallas Mavericks are plus 550 to win the conference and plus 1100 to win the title. So some real odds opportunity there if you're looking to make a bet on Dallas.